Honestly, it's been a very long time since I've played any Prince of Persia game for the PlayStation 2, which later came to the PlayStation 3 via the Trilogy pack. Now I've basically done everything in this game. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the platforming, which is one of the best, and I enjoyed the puzzles. Well, the easy ones. The story and lore of the Prince of Persia, I like that as well. Like how the prince, unknowing to him, unleashed the sands of time, killing his father, while Jaffa Cakes, who is the visor, gets all the power and becomes the villain of Sands of Time, the first game. There's also his love interest Farah as well, but she doesn't remember anything about the prince at the end of Sands of Time. Then the second game comes around and Prince falls in love with the villain. Well, she's not technically a villain if you 100% of the game to get the true ending, but then again that doesn't matter, as in the third game, to Two Thrones, she gets killed. I did like his alter ego though, that was pretty cool. But the confusing part of the story is that Jaffa Cake comes back when he died in the first one. I thought he died. And Farah comes back as well. I don't know, the third game is confusing. But at least at the end him and Farah do talk together though. Anyhow, I didn't know that there was another game. No, I'm not talking about the cel shaded version of Prince of Persia that came out in 2008, I think. I never played that game, but there was another Prince of Persia game that came after that called The Forgotten Sands, and I found that out when I was going to a second-hand shop and I picked it up. Honestly, I can't wait to play this game, as it was in my backlogs of games that I need to play. Well, first let's start on how the game came to be, because I'm intrigued myself. It was made and published by Ubisoft. Not much can be said about the development other than the devs wanted to make a story around the 7-year gap between Sands of Time and What Is Within. The team chose to return to Sands of Time universe rather than a remake because fans and the devs were keen on continuing the story from the original trilogy. Moreover than that, the game was ported to many systems and the story changes throughout each one. Like the PSP version, you get help from the Sisters of Time, giving the prince new powers. In the DS version, the prince gets kidnapped by a cult, and lastly the Wii version, the prince meets a genie. Like all the parts are different in terms of story and gameplay. The game came out in May 2010, around the same time as the movie starring Jake Gyllenhaal, and Ubisoft used this opportunity to reach new audience and expose them to the game. Whether it worked or not, I have no idea. Another thing I want to talk about is Ubisoft Uplay bullshit, because some content of the game is locked behind it and the servers for it isn't working anymore, and that's a shame. Prince of Persia The Forgotten Sands received mild positive reception for its lack of innovation compared to previous Prince of Persia games and the linear level design. The visual presentation looks the same as the previous titles like Two Thrones and Sands of Time. It's repetitive to look at and bland to see. I wasn't wowed by it. The graphics is rough around the edges, as well as the character models for the prince, which no one liked. I mean, it isn't awful, but isn't good neither, just in the middle. I mean, the CGI cutscene at the beginning of the game looks good, but in-game cutscene doesn't translate well to that. The locked content in Uplay, of one of them is a costume for the prince, and it's an assassin costume. Which assassin? Well, it's Ezio Auditore the Waluigi costume. And why is it locked behind some shit like Uplay rather than being unlockable? Unlocking it would be sick, playing as Ezio in the Prince of Persia game, since the Assassin's Creed game derived from Prince of Persia and became an own successful and well-known IP. But back to the point of the prince character model, one of the reviews said that they played the game as Ezio since they didn't like the prince's face. I mean, that's just being a cunt. But hey, this reviewer must be infatuated by the Middle Eastern look, even though the prince does not look Middle Eastern at all. And so for my opinion of the game, I was excited. I mean, we got no Prince of Persia game in a long time, and I forgot about this one, so let's get to it. First, I'm going to talk about the gameplay. For the combat by itself isn't special or new if you played What Is Within or the Two Thrones, and I'll argue that those combat are much better, for me at least. But there is something new that this game brings which I liked, and that is that you can control and have the power of the elementals.
You've got some nerve setting foot into my domain without an invitation. Don't talk back to me! I'll fix that attitude problem of yours!
No, not the elementals from Crash Bandicoot Wrath of Cortex.
Oh, I'm gonna shake, rattle, and roll your bandicoot butt.
The elements you control are fire, ice, wind, and stone. The ice power, you can slash your sword, creating a wave dealing damage to a horde of sand monsters. The stone power encases a prince in stone to protect him from any attacks for a short time. The wind power can blow away the sand army if you're swarmed by them, giving you space, plus you get a free kill on the ground. And the final, the fire power, isn't the same as the ice, but it leaves a trail of fire behind, causing damage to which idiot touches it. It's good to roll around a horde of enemies dealing more damage, and those are the offense attack. It's pretty innovative for the franchise, for the prince to control the elements, so I don't know why people said that it isn't. There are some parts of the combat I don't like, starting with the camera. Now whenever you attack the enemies, the prince sometimes does a flashy move on them and the camera zooms in too close as I can't see what's around me, plus enemies don't stop. meaning I can get attacked whenever the animation is over, or I did the flashy moves mid-swing, leaving me no choice but to take a hit. It was frustrating, as later on you face more difficult enemies with different abilities. The second is that there's no lock-on feature, meaning I can't focus on one target, and since this game takes pride in showing how many enemies it can show on the screen, sometimes I'll just swing my sword at the direction I wasn't supposed to swing at. The bosses in this game are brain dead easy. They're all the same. You just need to hide between the leg of the jinns or sand monsters and swing away. Swing away, George.
Oh, my balls!
And what's worse is the final part of the game. It was nauseating as the platform and the environment were moving, swaying out of control. It was bad, and the game abruptly ends. There is an upgrade system, like upgrading your health, time slots, and making your elemental attack stronger, and basic sword attack stronger too. And if you're feeling it, there's a challenge mode in where you fight waves of enemies, getting tougher each time you play. There's a locked challenge mode you can get via Uplay, but that is lost by the servers of Ubisoft. And lastly, the pillars of Prince of Persia, the Sands of Time itself, in where you can rectify your mistakes by rewinding time and try again for a limited time, depending on how much slots you have available. By all means, it doesn't make the game easier or harder. The choice and power to use it is in your hands. Use it too much, then you won't have any slots left to use the Sands of Time. Then unfortunately you have to start at your last checkpoint when you make a mistake, and using it moderately means you're very good at this particular game. So that was the combat side of the gameplay, but keep in mind that Prince of Persia is known for platforming. So how was it in this game? Well, it was different. The exploration and platform for the Prince of Persia are one of my favourite parts of the game, and here is no different. I love it. At the later part it becomes challenging and reactionary, but let's start at the basic. The prince can wall run either way, vertical or horizontal, doesn't matter, he doesn't skip leg day for that. But it's not that easy, as you have to avoid elusive traps. Would it be Prince of Persia without it? I do have a question. Why are these traps in the strangest place, even if it's for defensive purposes? It's weird. Are all the traps made for slide, just in case there's a crossover? As I said, for the combat part, the prince have elemental powers that are for offensive attacks, and here he has power for platforming, and these powers are flow. With this you can control water, kind of. You can solidify it to run across it, swing across it, or hold onto it, but it isn't easy, as later part of the game it becomes like a puzzle on whether you should solidify the waterfall, then as soon as you jump, let go of the flow button to cancel it, and press it again to do the same on the water swinging bars. It's elaborate. I'll just be repeating myself.
Be water, my friend.
Another power that the prince can do is warp towards an enemy way off in the distance if you can't get to it yourself by physical means. This also works on sandbirds. And lastly, you can recall areas that were destroyed and restore them, kinda like using Sands of Time but on an object. Unfortunately, you can only do this once at a time. It's the same as the water solidifying powers, you just need to use your head to get around certain tasks. These powers that you obtain are given by the water jinn Razia, and in later parts of the game she fuses with the sword that you obtain to kill the big bad wolf. And with the sword you can one shot mostly all enemies, so it becomes a breeze, except for the platforming and the puzzles. This game didn't have that great of a puzzles. Only one gave me trouble, and it was a Gears one. The rest were easy to figure out. Now for the part I hate about the platforming is that they changed the button placement, like R1 and L1 are now R2 and L2, when the Trilogy button layout was R1 and L1. And the last part I hate about platforming is the annoying R2 and X button. You see, the R2 button you can wall run up and to the sides, right, while the X button makes you jump off, and for a certain time I got confused whether or not to press the X or R2. Like for instance, you can wall run, press R2, then jump off, press X to another wall, then press R2 to run up again. This is also a new mechanic for this game, but like I said, it was frustrating and confusing. Most likely my death of this game was due to that, and I hated it. And the performance issue I had with this game is that the sound would cut off for a second, as my PS3 fans became loud for a second. I think it was either loading the game or doing something else. As for the story, I liked enough because it talks about King Solomon or Suleiman and the jinns. The story isn't that too complex to understand. I will say that I'm happy that the Prince voice actor is the same as before. The story takes place after the Sands of Time and before Warrior Within. So the story goes like this. The prince meets with his brother Malik, or how the game pronounces it, Malik. I mean, you might as well call him Malik Madik. Anyways, his kingdom is attacked by an army, and deep down in the treasure room, Malik has Solomon's army, which lies dormant. Using the seal, Malik unleashes the power, splitting the seal in half, one for the prince and one for Malik, and his palace is consumed by sand, and his people are molded by it, while they're being overrun by the sand army. At first I thought it was the jinn, but they're made from smokeless fire. Now that Malik has the power, he refuses to stop it, and the big bad jinn appears, called Ratash, who looks like Ifrit from Final Fantasy and isn't smokeless fire. He's a joke of a character and a boss. He's easily defeated but not gone, as he now possesses Malik and he becomes the final bad guy. That's a given since they mispronounced his name wrong, Malik Sadiq. Also, the prince gets help from the water jinn called Razia from the Myriad race. In basic terms, a rebellious group of jinns. Couple of power-ups later and the prince confronts Malik, who transforms as a jinn he once fought, Ratash, only looking slightly different. Using the sword of Razia, the demon is defeated and his brother Malik is freed but dies because of continuity. His final words to his brother is that he thinks he will be the mightier ruler than Solomon, and that's the end of the story. There is an epilogue in where the prince returns the swords back to Rekhem, the place where he found the sword, and he parts way with Razia and set sail to tell his father that Malik is now dead. So that's my review of Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands. I really do miss this franchise. I really do. So going back to this and experiencing this for the first time, I enjoyed it. Sure, the graphics are awful. I don't mind the character model for the prince, and the enemy design is meh, and the soundtrack I barely remembered. The platforming, the exploration of linear level, I quite liked it a lot, except for the final part of the game where everything was pissing me off. But like, Assassin's Creed is way popular and has wide varieties in terms of story, so I understand that if Ubisoft isn't giving this franchise enough attention that it deserves, especially since Assassin's Creed came from it. So yeah, I really love the Prince of Persia series and I'll miss it dearly, since this is the last of the franchise. I've been AnimersiveXP. Make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and you'll see me in the next video. Bye bye.